It's an absolutely incredible day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has just revealed the commanders for the upcoming Final Fantasy Commander decks, and they have to be seen to be believed. On top of that, there has been a leak for the upcoming Lorwyn set that gives me genuine hope for the future of Magic the Gathering.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a glorious and fun-filled installment of Mega Magic News. This is Good and Happy Times edition. I am genuinely feeling truly hopeful about the future of Magic the Gathering after the Lorwyn leak. And on top of that, as somebody who just recently discovered the joy of playing Commander and has just started to collect up a bunch of the Commander precons, pretty much becoming obsessed with trying to get them all, these new Final Fantasy Commanders are ultra exciting. Each one is based on a different Final Fantasy game. So we get Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy X, and Final Fantasy XIV. And for me, that is a very interesting lineup. I don't really know much about 14, but the other three I have played a ton of, and Final Fantasy VI is my favorite of all time. So the choices that they have made with these characters and the design of them feel fantastic. It genuinely is like, yo, this represents each of the individual games. So let's dive in and take a look at those right now. We're starting off with what's bound to be the most popular of these four commanders, and that is Cloud, ex-soldier from Final Fantasy VII. 1 white, 1 green, 1 red, and 2 for a legendary human soldier mercenary. And look at the symbol they're using for these decks. It's a little chocobo. I love it so much. So Cloud is 4/4 with haste. When he enters, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to him. Whenever he attacks, draw a card for each equipped attacking creature you control. Then if Cloud has power 7 or greater, create 2 treasure tokens. This is absolutely bonkers. When he comes out, you literally just get to grab any piece of gear and slap it on him. Whether it's something from the actual commander deck, like his Buster Sword, which I presume will crank him up to 7 power, or some dumb nonsense like a Colossus Hammer, you're going to be able to go ham with him right out of the gates. And then his second ability down here that says, oh, by the way, draw cards if you're attacking with equipped creatures, that doesn't require you actually connecting with the creatures. So you're going to get to declare them as attackers, draw the cards, and then play cards to remove blockers or other combat tricks. This is insane. And that's not even counting the fact that you'll be able to recast him from the command zone over and over. This is amazing. And the artwork is epic. Cloud is here getting ready to whip off a massive limit break with his Buster Sword. Cloud is the most powerful creature, the most powerful dude in Final Fantasy VII, at least on the good guy side. You can obviously argue that Sephiroth is also incredibly fearsome. Watching him walk through the flames towards you, man, the idea of the whole game is just wild. You're basically playing as Cloud. You've been experimented on, had alien DNA injected into you, and also you've got this link to Sephiroth where you're not even 100% sure what's going on, and you unravel all these elements of your own history, while at the same time the entire world is under threat of extinction. The game blew my mind. Eris staring down into that little fireplace and green motes are floating up, and she sees what's about to happen to her. We're gonna get a card with Sephiroth just coming down out of the sky. Bam! Straight with the blade through it. I can't even. It's absolutely amazing. And on that note, there is a good chance that each of these commander decks will feature the complementary villain. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cloud is one of the commanders and Sephiroth is the other. That may not be the case, but from the answers that Wizards of the Coast was giving when they were interviewed about these decks, they really did hammer in the villainous concept as well. So it totally may end up that we get the villains in the decks usable as commanders, and it looks like we might have more than 2 options for commanders for these decks. So I am super hyped about seeing how all of this plays out. Let's move on to talking about the next one, which is Y'shtola, I believe that's how it's pronounced, Knights Blessed. Now this is one of the games that I never actually played. Final Fantasy XII is where I kind of fell away from the game and didn't really follow along with the series. So I don't know a lot of background information about this character. Apparently there are different iterations where she started out as a healer, more on the light side, and this is the Shadowbringers arc where she has moved into dark magic. So that's the concept for this. So 1 black, 1 blue, 1 white for a 2/4 legendary cat warlock. She's got vigilance. At the beginning of each end step, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, you draw a card. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. So the idea behind this deck is it's supposed to be about card advantage and control. And from a flavor perspective, looking at it, if this is indeed supposed to be her moving over to the dark side of Magic, then you can see, okay, you basically gain advantage when people lose life. And it doesn't matter if it's your side or anyone else, right? This is any player. So I don't know if there's a dark aspect to her character that actually puts some of her friends in danger, but if that is what's going on, then that ties in nicely to this ability. And then the second one here, whenever you cast big creatures, you basically get to injure your opponents, right? And you gain life from it. So the draining of souls or whatever it is. Ultimately, this is an interesting card to me. The concept tied together with all of the dark background around her gives a sense of foreboding. The black dress with the fur. I like the vibe of this character. Her staff is really interesting looking. Now, for me, obviously, because I'm not really familiar with the story of the game, this is the one that's least interesting to me from a flavor perspective, but the abilities seem really solid. Getting to feed off your opponent's life, and whenever anybody hurts one of your opponents, or hurts you, you're going to get to draw cards. So you're constantly going to be getting that card advantage. And obviously in Commander, the more resources you have to take down your 3 opponents, the better. Moving on to the next card, we've got Titus, depending on how you pronounce it. This is one people argue about. Yuna's Guardian. So this is Final Fantasy X. Oh man, this one was an interesting mixed bag. There's a bunch of cool aspects to the story, but I have to fully admit that the whole underwater soccer blitzball stuff felt really strange to me. So for some people, they love that part of it. Other people, they're like, no, just give me his weird laugh. Ho, 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 right? Anyways, 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 green for a 3/3 legendary human warrior. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. And cheer. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control with counters on them deal combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and proliferate, but you only do this once each turn. So that reins it in from being too powerful. Now, when you look at the first ability here, you might be thinking, oh, passing the counters around is actually like passing the blitzball around. And you can view it that way, but according to the information provided by Wizards of the Coast, this is actually supposed to represent Final Fantasy X's sphere grid leveling system, which was actually pretty funky. Final Fantasy had a number of different ways of boosting up your characters, and the way they did it in Final Fantasy X was pretty involved and pretty interesting. So ultimately, when you look at this is a tight little package for 3 mana. You're going to get to move counters around. This will play well with ability counters as well, not just +1/+1 counters. So flying, first strike, trample counters. I expect the deck to be wielding a lot of those because, like they said, they're leaning into the sphere grid leveling system. So having different abilities crank out that way would have that kind of flavor. And then down here, drawing cards and proliferating is just going to let you move more of those counters around. And because of his first ability, you can even proliferate counters you'd normally never proliferate, which, say, for example, why would you ever put an extra flying counter on a creature or an extra death touch counter on a creature? You wouldn't, because you don't need to really. But you put 2 on it, move 1 to another guy, now they both have death touch, right? So that ties in pretty well. The story of this card, actually, I should say the story of the game, is pretty interesting. Titus is from a world where they have this crazy monstrosity known as Sin, like a gigantic world-ending beast. And he is like this high-tiered blitzball player. He's basically a super famous athlete, right? But he is the son of an even more super famous athlete. And big spoilers, if you didn't already know, guess what? His dad turns out to be tied in to the final ultimate evil, the sin that is known for tearing the world apart. So I'm not going to go like any more into it, but ultimately that's what's going down. Final Fantasy X had some really awesome moments. I love, like he's called Yuna's guardian. I love Yuna in this. She's a priestess who basically sends the souls of the departed on their way. And there are these incredible cutscenes in the game where she's basically dancing across the water, wielding her magic as spirits fly upwards. And man, it just gets me. And for those of you who really enjoy the Titus Yuna, check this out. We have this artwork. This is from Together Forever. So this is going to be available in the Final Fantasy stuff as well. I presume it'll be in this commander deck, but it's not automatically going to be in there because the actual Final Fantasy set, which is a full-on set that comes along with these commander decks, is going to feature cards from all of the different Final Fantasies. So if you like any of the Final Fantasies, fill your boots. And there are some earlier ones that aren't mentioned in these commander decks that I'm super happy that they're going to include nods to. But ultimately, Titus seems pretty solid. After that, we've got Terra, Herald of Hope. Final Fantasy VI is my absolute favorite Final Fantasy. Seeing this put me over the moon. You have no idea how hyped I am about this. I'm literally in the middle of a playthrough of this actual game, and I'm in the second half where you go to the world of ruin, where basically Kefka has destroyed the world, and now you have to rebuild your party. Everybody is scattered. You have to find them and get them all together so you can make things right, and it's just so good. So just so you understand, this version of Terra, the actual like deck that they're doing, is based around the world of ruin, and they had considered actually doing Celeste as the commander for this deck, but they chose Terra instead, which I think is a great choice, and I'll talk about why after we go through what the card does. So 1 black, 1 white, 1 red for a legendary human wizard warrior, although she's not purely human, right? She's 3/3, she's trance. At the beginning of combat on your turn, mill 2 cards. Terra gains flying until end of turn. And whenever Terra deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2. When you do, return target creature card with power 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So, the milling of cards going into the graveyard and the bringing creatures back represent essentially the destruction of the world, everybody being scattered all over the world of ruin, and then the bringing them back from the graveyard is rebuilding your party. That's the concept, is it's rebuild. So this ties in fantastically to the flavor of the world. And the reason she gets flying, in case you don't know, is Terra is actually the child of a human and an Esper. And Espers are beings of pure magic. So basically, through their union, she has been imbued with magical powers. She's being taken advantage of by the evil empire in this game, right? So at the beginning of the game, she's the character you start as. She doesn't know who she is, and she's just being used as a massively destructive pawn. So through the process of playing through the game, you find out her lineage, and when she finds out that she's half Esper, it literally breaks her mind, and she basically manifests this crazy amount of magic and whips off into the sky flying with their Esper-born powers. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did another version of her showing her as an actual Esper. The whole concept is completely wild, right? The Espers in Final Fantasy VI are basically wiped out and turned into magicite, which is their dead essence that can be used to teach people magic. There's so much incredible flavor, and seeing Terra depicted like this is amazing. And speaking of amazing depictions from Final Fantasy VI, if you haven't seen it, Kefka poisoning the water outside of Doma. Kefka is one of the most iconic and incredible villains ever created, not just in Final Fantasy, ever overall. He has this particular delight that he takes in just destruction and harming people. He is villainous to the bone, and his laughter is incredibly memorable, to the point where my lady goes, "Is Kefka's on the screen, isn't he, right now?" And she can hear the laughing from another area, and she's never played the game and has only heard me play it once, and she already knows how amazing Kefka is. So here he is, literally pouring poison into the water outside of Doma. This is the key art for the set. I cannot get over how gorgeous this is. And if you guys didn't hear, they also got Amano on this. So they have special artwork done by Amano, the guy who was responsible for the original Final Fantasy artwork, the one who did that amazing Liliana from War of the Spark. He is involved with this project as well, probably with some kind of serialized cards too. I cannot wait to see what it's gonna be. But man, it's absolutely mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing to me how awesome this concept is. Seeing Final Fantasy VI represented as a commander deck, I absolutely have to have this deck. And now, my friends, I have a bonus treat that I didn't mention before. Check it out. This is the Beta Black Lotus Silver Coin. You may remember last year, the Alpha Edition was released, and people on my channel loved it. We were actually responsible for collecting up 5% of the entire print run of these coins. So I'm going to give you a closer up look at this. These are coins that are limited to less than 2,500. So there's 2,499 of them. It is a $5 coin that is a 1 ounce silver coin. Okay, so if this is something that you would like to own, it will be available for sale in a few days. I'll put the date up on the screen for you to check it out. I'll also leave a link down in the comments. When they did the alpha run, these coins sold out in less than a day. So you're going to want to grab them when the link goes live. Make sure you use my link when you grab your coin so that it helps support the channel. Turning now to Lorwyn, you can file this information under the category of "A Little Birdie Told Me." If you didn't already know, Lorwyn was supposed to be released this year around this time. So if you looked at the new Secret Lair Super Drop and you saw that Lorwyn Secret Lair and thought to yourself, wait a minute, how does this connect to anything? Is this some old Secret Lair? Where does this fit into their concept? Well, it was originally supposed to come out alongside Lorwyn, but Wizards of the Coast decided that Lorwyn was going to be moved to the beginning of 2026 to make way for Avatar: The Last Airbender, which will be the final set of Universe Beyond coming out this year. But the product has essentially been finalized. They could end up changing the product packaging or the name of the set, but it looks like right now it's going to be called Lorwyn Eclipsed, and it's going to follow up what happened in the events of the previous Lorwyn, where you have the Great Aurora. If you don't know what that is, it was a light and dark cycle that lasted for hundreds of years, which not only dictated like the sunniness of the world, but actually the nature of the denizens of the world. So when you had the light version, everything was friendly and inviting, like a very happy fairy tale, right? And even the goblins, their mischief they would get up to is, we're gonna go steal a giant's tooth, or we're gonna swipe your pies. It was very like, we're not actually that dangerous. And then you move into the dark side of it and everybody is a problem. Even the Kithkins, the little halfling kind of parallel, they just became, we hate outsiders, stay away from us. Like there is nowhere safe to go on the dark side of Lorwyn, right? You have Morningtide, Eventide as it switches, back and forth. But that entire cycle ended. The magic of it was broken, and Lorwyn returned to a natural cycle, and we haven't been back since. So I have been harboring fears that when we return to Lorwyn, it was going to be reskinned the same way that Kamigawa was taken and turned into a cyberistic cyberpunk analog, right? That's what they did to it. Yes, there was nods to the original Kamigawa, but it didn't feel like Kamigawa. It felt very technical, futuristic. I don't like modern things in Magic. I like what I consider to be traditional high fantasy. Swords, sorcery, all that kind of crazy magic. And Lorwyn, the new one, looks like it's going to deliver just that, with a heavy emphasis on elven tribal. So the elves of Lorwyn have a very particular vibe to them, a very particular look. They are sort of fragile looking with a very delicate beauty, and that is being carried over into this set. On top of that, it looks like they might have changed the Kithkin into weird little underground freaks with big old shaggy beards. It seems like the Kithkin are moving more from being halflings into being dwarves almost. So I think they're doing a reimagining of the Kithkins to a degree. Maybe they couldn't adapt to the new world after the Aurora. But nothing that I've looked at from the set makes me think that it has anything to do with futuristic stuff, modernization. I'm not even sure if Wizards is going to have some kind of other tie-in. You know how they had like the Ghostbusters and Chucky tie-ins and stuff like that for Duskmourn? I don't know if they're going to have anything like that for Lorwyn. There's no hint of that. Although admittedly, I've only been given a bit of information. Some of that information is that there'll be some new products that are likely to be featured. Bear in mind, these product types may show up before Lorwyn does. So you've got draft boxes, which are boxes specifically aimed towards 4-player drafts, right? And may just contain enough for one person each to draft. So you'd have 4 people who would each get one of these, almost akin to pre-release kits, but most likely targeted at getting people to draft at home with their friends and tie into the whole, do you play Commander? You have a 4-player group. I'm really interested to see what the underlying logic of draft boxes is. It could be something along the lines of 3 regular booster packs plus a collector pack, but bear in mind, the information about this is somewhat nebulous because when the birds are tweeting at you, sometimes it's hard to figure out what they're saying, right? And then the other thing is theme decks. So these are 60-card pre-con decks that feature essentially 1 rare and then a bunch of commons and uncommons. Now, when you look at it, it really does kind of feel like a theme booster scaled up into being a deck at a higher price point than a theme deck. Think probably 2 or 3 times the cost of a theme deck. But they're presented in the same way as commander decks are, with a face character and then the mana costs of what it's going to be, a little description of what the deck is, and they may even be featuring different legendary individuals from Magic's history on these boxes. So I'm very interested to see how those are going to turn out, because the theme decks before were a massive failure, but these are products that you can use right out of the box, and they cater more to the pauper crowd, right? All you have to do is swap out the 1 rare that's involved with it, and now you've just got commons and uncommons, and you can rock and roll. So you can play, what is it, Artisan Pauper or something like that, where it's just commons, like use commons and uncommons, and your commander is uncommon. So it looks like Wizards of the Coast is expanding their offerings, but it might also be the draft boxes might be coming out to replace bundles. Again, not 100% clear. Don't always know what the birds are tweeting at me, but regardless, looking at Lorwyn, it genuinely does feel like it's going to be what older school Magic was, and we're moving away from this current gimmicky era. Lorwyn is a non-hat set that is done in an old school world that has a lot of potential for some enjoyable storytelling of what's been going on there. So I'm looking forwards to it. Now, that wraps up all the news that I have to talk about today. If you want to talk about this Final Fantasy action, you want to talk about Lorwyn, or even about that cool Silver Beta Black Lotus, then you can come on over to my live stream tonight that I'm doing over on my live stream channel, where we'll be talking about all of that, especially the Final Fantasy stuff, because I'm so hyped. I had to rein myself in and not just keep going on and on and on, especially about Final Fantasy VI, or this video would have been like 4 hours long. So, thanks for coming by and hearing what I have to say. Big shout out to my patrons for supporting my channel. You guys rule, and I will see you all in the next video.